Picture this: you land in America, you step outside the airport, and within 10 minutes you start thinking, wait, is everyone acting in a movie right now? Because in the United States, a lot of everyday life feels completely normal to Americans, but to foreigners, it can feel confusing, hilarious, or even a little unbelievable. And here's the funny part: most Americans don't notice these habits at all. They're like background music. You only hear it when you come from somewhere else. So in this video, we're going through normal American habits that shock foreigners, tourists, immigrants, exchange students, and pretty much anyone seeing the US up close for the first time. Some of these will make you laugh. Some will make you say, that can't be real. And a few might make Americans themselves go, wait, we do that? Stay to the end, because I'll explain the deeper reason behind these habits. Why they exist, what Americans mean by them, and why the culture can feel so different even when people are being genuinely kind. Alright. Let's jump in. The first shock for many foreigners is how friendly strangers can seem. In many countries, strangers don't talk unless there's a reason. If someone starts chatting with you on the street or in a store, your brain immediately goes, what do they want? But in America, you can be standing in line for coffee, and the person behind you will casually say something like, morning. How's it going, like you've known them for years. Then you realize it's not a deep question. It's more like a greeting. It's a social handshake. To foreigners, it can feel fake at first. But usually it's not. It's just a habit. Americans often treat friendliness as good manners. They've learned that a quick smile and a little small talk makes public life smoother. And that leads directly into the second shock: how are you doesn't mean, how are you? In many cultures, if you ask that question, you're opening the door to a real answer. If someone asks how you are, you might actually tell them. In America, how are you is often just the start of a script. The expected response is something short like, good, or doing great, even if your life is falling apart. Foreigners find this hilarious. Some find it confusing. And some make the mistake of answering honestly. They'll say, actually, I'm a bit stressed because my flight was delayed and my bags are missing. And the American cashier will freeze like their brain just got a software update. Not because they're cold. Not because they don't care. But because the phrase wasn't meant as an emotional conversation. It was meant as a polite greeting. So if you ever hear Americans doing this, just remember, it's not always a literal question. It's more like saying hello. Now let's talk about customer service, because American customer service can feel like a performance. Foreigners often notice the customer service voice. It's enthusiastic, cheerful, and full of phrases like absolutely, and of course, and no problem at all. Then at the end you'll get, have a wonderful day. In some countries, service is neutral. You order, you pay, you leave. No extra energy required. In America, service workers are often expected to be upbeat, because it affects tips, ratings, and even job security. So to foreigners, it can feel overly cheerful, maybe even suspicious, like, why are they this happy to sell me a sandwich? But for many workers, it's just part of the job. It's a social style Americans are used to, and they associate it with professionalism. Next shock: Americans compliment strangers like it's nothing. In many places, compliments are reserved for friends and family. If a stranger compliments you, it can feel personal, intense, or even strange. In America, someone might pass you and say, I love your shoes, or your hair looks great, and keep walking like it's normal. Foreigners often don't know how to respond. Some think the person is flirting. Others think it's sarcasm. But most of the time, it's just casual positivity. Americans use small compliments the way some cultures use small talk. It's a quick way to create warmth without deep connection. Now, let's enter the world of food and drinks, because this is where many foreigners get shocked fast. One of the biggest surprises is portion sizes. You sit down at a restaurant and the plate arrives looking like it's meant for 3 people. The fries are a mountain. The drink is the size of a small aquarium. And the dessert menu looks like it was designed by someone who hates human health. Foreigners often ask, "Is this a family meal?" And the waiter says, "No, that's just the regular." Then comes the moment of cultural adaptation, the to-go box. In some countries, taking leftovers home feels unusual. In America, it's normal and expected. People take home half their meal and eat it later. Restaurants even bring boxes without you asking. This ties into another American habit that shocks foreigners: free refills. In many places, you buy one drink and that's it. In America, in many restaurants, you can refill soda, iced tea, and sometimes coffee as much as you want. To foreigners, it feels like cheating the system. Like, you mean I can just keep refilling? Yes. You can. And speaking of drinks, foreigners often cannot understand one specific American obsession: ice. Americans put ice in everything. Water, soda, tea, sometimes even things that shouldn't have ice. Foreigners get a drink and it's 70% ice, 30% liquid, and they're like, "Did you run out of beverage?" In many countries, drinks are served cold but not ice-heavy. In the US, ice is the default, and if you say, "No ice," you might get a look like you just asked for something illegal. Another food-related shock is how common it is to eat while walking, driving, or doing other tasks. In many cultures, meals are slower. You sit down. You focus on eating. It's social time. In America, it's normal to eat in the car, eat at your desk, eat while shopping, eat between appointments. Foreigners sometimes describe it like America treats food as fuel. Quick, convenient, functional. That's not always true. Americans can enjoy long meals too, but the culture is heavily built around convenience. Which brings us to a massive shock that deserves its own spotlight: driving everywhere. Foreigners from places with strong public transport often arrive in the US and realize quickly, you need a car. You want coffee? Drive. You want groceries? Drive. You want to visit a friend 3 streets away? Somehow, drive. In many American cities and suburbs, sidewalks are rare, distances are large, and everything is designed for cars. So foreigners feel trapped if they don't have a vehicle. They're shocked that you can live in a place where walking is not just inconvenient, it's sometimes unsafe or impossible. And when they finally do drive, they notice another American habit: drive through everything. Drive through coffee. Drive through pharmacy. Drive through bank. Drive through fast food, of course. To foreigners, it's both impressive and slightly dystopian. Like, you mean I never have to leave the car? Yes. That's the point. Now let's talk about money culture, because this might be the biggest shock of all: tipping. Foreigners come to America and ask, "Wait, why am I paying the staff?" In many countries, workers are paid in their wage. Tipping is optional or small. In the US, tipping is basically built into the system, especially in restaurants. And it's not just restaurants. People tip baristas sometimes. Bartenders, definitely. Delivery drivers. Hair stylists. Taxi drivers. Hotel workers. Then the payment screen flips toward you with a big smile and suggests 20%, 25%, 30%. And you're standing there like you're taking a pop quiz you didn't study for. Foreigners find this stressful because it feels like invisible rules. They're afraid of being rude. They're afraid of tipping too little. They're afraid of tipping when they shouldn't. And Americans don't always agree on the rules either. So it becomes a cultural maze. The deeper truth is that tipping in America is tied to wages, especially for servers. In many states, tipped workers earn a lower base wage, and tips fill the gap. That's why tipping feels mandatory. Now, here's another habit that shocks foreigners: returning items is easy. In many places, once you buy something, it's yours. Returning can be hard, slow, or impossible unless it's defective. In America, you can buy something, try it, decide you don't like it, and return it with barely any questions. Foreigners are amazed. They ask, but, isn't that cheating? To Americans, it's customer service. To foreigners, it's a superpower. Now let's touch one carefully, but honestly. Because it shocks a lot of visitors, the complexity of healthcare. Foreigners often come from systems where healthcare is simple. You go to the doctor, you pay little or nothing, and you leave. In the US, people talk about insurance networks, deductibles, copays, out-of-pocket maximums, and bills that arrive weeks later. A foreigner hears that and thinks, so, you don't know the price before you get treatment? Often, yes. That's the strange part. Even Americans get confused by it. It's one of those systems where everyone has a story, and most stories start with, "I couldn't believe the bill." Now let's shift into a shock that foreigners notice at work: vacation time. Foreigners from many European countries come to America and ask, "So how much vacation do you get?" And some Americans say, 2 weeks. And the foreigners say, "Per month?" And the Americans say, "No. Per year." And the foreigners stare into the distance like they've just heard sad music. In many countries, longer vacations are normal. In America, the culture often values productivity, availability, and hustle. Which leads to another habit: Americans talk about work constantly. Even casual conversations can include, "What do you do? How's work? I'm so busy. I've got deadlines." Foreigners notice that identity is often tied to occupation. Americans introduce themselves by their job. They measure success through work goals. Not every American is like this, but it's common enough to feel like a cultural feature. And connected to that is the hustle mindset, side hustles, productivity hacks, building a personal brand. Foreigners sometimes find it inspiring. Other times, they find it exhausting. Now, let's talk about something foreigners mention all the time: the size of everything. America is big, and Americans built things to match. Big houses. Big fridges. Big cars. Big supermarkets. Big parking lots. Foreigners walk into an American grocery store and feel like they've entered a warehouse. They see 40 types of cereal. An entire aisle of peanut butter. A wall of snacks. Then they see people buying in bulk like they're preparing for a winter apocalypse. And this is normal because many Americans drive to stores less often, or have larger homes with more storage, or live far from shopping areas. Bulk buying fits the lifestyle. Another shock: Americans use first names fast. In some cultures, you use titles. Mr. This, Mrs. That, Doctor, Professor. In America, people often go straight to first names, even at work, even with older people, sometimes even with teachers. Foreigners can interpret that as disrespectful, but in America it's often meant to feel equal and friendly. Now, we have to talk about one detail foreigners mention constantly because it's so oddly specific. Bathroom stall gaps. If you've ever used a public bathroom in America, you know what I'm talking about. The stall door doesn't close like a proper door. There are gaps on the sides. Sometimes you can practically make eye contact through the opening. Foreigners are shocked. They're like, "Why is this legal?" Americans don't always have an answer. They just accept it like it's part of the national design. And if you want the theory, people say it's for safety, easier cleaning, and lower cost. But to foreigners, it feels like privacy was optional. Another shock: warning labels everywhere. Coffee cups that warn the contents are hot. Ladders with labels telling you not to stand on the top. Products warning you not to do things that feel obvious. Foreigners find it funny. They ask, "Who needed this warning?" Americans often say, "Someone sued." Whether or not every label comes from a lawsuit, America is a highly liability-aware society. Companies protect themselves with warnings, policies, and signs. Now, let's talk about patriotism, because foreigners notice this immediately. American flags are everywhere. Outside houses, on shirts, on cars, in schools, at events. In some countries, flags are mostly for government buildings or sports. In the US, flags appear in everyday life. Foreigners can find this intense. But many Americans see it as normal pride, tradition, or respect for the country. And you'll often see it in small things, like national anthem moments at sports games, or respect for military service. It can feel unusual to visitors, but again, it's cultural. Now, here's a social habit that shocks foreigners in a different way. Americans are very open, but also very private. Let me explain. Americans might share personal things quickly, like goals, dreams, emotions, or opinions, especially in casual conversation. But they can also be strict about boundaries, like personal space, property lines, and certain kinds of direct questions. Foreigners often notice that Americans can feel open and guarded at the same time, depending on the topic. Another habit, Americans can be direct about preferences. I don't like that. I'm not interested. That's not for me. In some cultures, people soften it more. In America, directness is often valued as honesty and efficiency. Now, I want to do a quick lightning round of smaller shocks that foreigners often mention, because these are too good to ignore. First, air conditioning. In America, buildings can feel like Antarctica in the summer. Foreigners bring a jacket to the mall because they're freezing inside while it's 35 degrees outside. Second, water is free at restaurants. In many places, you buy bottled water. In the US, tap water is commonly served free, with ice, without asking. Third, Americans love convenience stores and drive-thrus. Fourth, measuring in inches, feet, and Fahrenheit. Foreigners are like, what do you mean it's 72 degrees? Is that good or bad? Fifth, Americans can be very friendly to strangers, but not necessarily looking for friendship. Foreigners sometimes think, wow, I've made a new friend, when really it was just polite conversation. Now, here's the most important part of the whole video. If you're watching this and thinking, America is weird, remember this, every country has habits that seem normal inside the culture and strange outside of it. These American habits exist for reasons. A huge country designed around cars creates convenience culture. A service economy creates tipping culture. A society built on mobility and immigration creates small talk scripts, quick friendliness, and casual compliments. A work-focused system creates hustle language, limited vacation, and identity tied to jobs. A consumer-driven economy creates bulk buying, easy returns, and massive stores. So when foreigners feel shocked, it's not because Americans are wrong. It's because the defaults are different. And honestly, that's what makes traveling and learning about other cultures so fascinating. Now let me ask you something. Where are you watching from? And what's the most normal American habit that shocked you the first time you saw it? Or, if you're American, what's one thing foreigners always point out to you that you never noticed until someone mentioned it? Drop your country in the comments, and your number one culture shock. And if you want a part 2, normal things abroad that shock Americans, subscribe, because that one gets wild fast. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.